noticed the similarities between a narcissist and a cult? Very often, narcissistic abuse is considered the cult of one. My guest today is a friend of mine, Vanessa Reiser. She's an author, an entrepreneur, and a two-time Ironman, and a psychotherapist specializing in narcissistic abuse as well as cult abuse. So, what we're going to talk about today is the cult and the overlap between cult behaviors and narcissistic behaviors. And I want to just tell you one more thing about Vanessa, which is a pretty cool little factoid. She actually is best known for running across the state of New York, 285 miles, to raise awareness about narcissistic abuse. Get it? In her wedding dress. She ran 285 miles in her wedding dress. Isn't that cool? And then she eventually ran across Connecticut, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. So she's really doing her part to raise awareness. So let's go meet Vanessa, okay? Welcome, Vanessa. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Today we're going to talk about the similarities between cults and narcissistic abuse. And, if you know anything about cults, it's control, it's manipulation. So how did you get involved in really putting the two pieces together?
Well, when I went through my own experience, and then started to do work with a lot of my clients, I began to realize all of the parallels and the crossovers and overlaps between somebody who is manipulating a person in an interpersonal relationship, or somebody who's manipulating a family system, or somebody who's manipulating a gaggle of people, or even a larger group of people. So the same manipulation tactics were at play. There were really no, differences that I could find between the narcissist, the sociopath, or the psychopath who's running one relationship with one person versus relationship with millions of followers.
Yeah, to me, it's a no-brainer, right? It's a cult of one, and that's what people don't understand. That the overlap is overwhelming. So, like, can you tell us what the reasons are and fusing the concepts between them? Like, how are the similarities that you see?
Yeah, so we see people that will triangulate,
Mhm,
um, isolate, manipulate, have no boundaries,
mhm.
um, will oftentimes have this need to feel like they are the leader. They have no empathy. They are passive aggressive. But generally, the idea is for them to control so they can get this coveted supply. They need to feel like this sort of guru or the leader. It makes them feel important because they don't have a healthy baseline. Their baseline is below the normal person's healthy baseline. So they kind of feel like they have to pull people down to make themselves feel better. And to do that, they have to manipulate and control others. And so it seems like they have a playbook. And I think the reason for that is because they develop these skills, we could call them, or tactics or characteristics very early on because they work. At a young age, they figure out how they can get their needs met through manipulation, and they continue to use those same exact plays throughout their lives. And it sort of seems like they must be having this meeting every month, but it's because those things do work. And you're not going to realize that somebody is a deviant, because why would you ever expect somebody would purposefully hurt others? But that's what they do. They kind of figure that out. They're sort of paying attention, and they can see how they can get the masses to do what they want, what they desire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually wrote a blog on this the other day, but narcissist control with gaslighting, guilt tripping, and emotional blackmail, cults go into brainwashing, indoctrination, and exploitation, right? So it's all about the mind control. It's from the very moment it's they're telling you lies, so because it's what you want to hear, right? And the same thing in the cult. There's nothing better. You have to be part of our family, whatever it is, they're working them into the cult. And so does the narcissist.
Yeah, and that is the fusing. So thank you for saying that. That is the fusing right there, is the mind control. That's when it clicked for me. I was like, so this sort of puppeteering, the positive reinforcement, which is very Pavlovian. We see it working. You can manipulate, you know, if you wanted to train a dog, you can do the same thing. You give this little gift and the dog, you'll get the same. So they figured out how to be master manipulators, and all of it is about mind control. That is the overarching theme for the narcissist, the sociopath, and the psychopath, is this mind control. That is the whole, that's it. That's everything you need to know. That's what they're trying to do.
We're done. But if you think about it, it's also isolation. I remember with both of my last two narcissists, when I was married, you're our family now, and you don't need them. You don't see them very much anywhere. They're not that nice, but you're our family. And it was sort of cut out your friends, cut out your family. And a cult does that as well, right? They're not allowed to see outside people if they're really in a true on cult, a religious cult at least. But this is again the weapon of a narcissist and the weapon of the cult leaders.
Yeah, and we saw this with, I think, Tom Cruise with the Scientology cult. He was disallowed from looking at media. So they're kind of keeping you with blinders on, this sort of tunnel vision. There's nothing to see here. We don't want you to know the truth. They might even take over your email, your bank account, your text message, your phone, anything to keep you focused on them and not paying attention to what they are allergic to, which is the truth.
Yeah. And so we can talk all day about the similarities between a narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, and a cult leader, because most cult leaders are in the psychopath, sociopath range, right? But what are the victims? Why do they pick the victims that they choose? And I'm thinking codependence, because they're so kind and loving and they give and give. What other parts of the profile make them good narc bait, if you would?
So my theory on this is that the narcissist casts out a zillion lines. They don't have a type. They don't give a shit as long as you have a pulse. That's the way they see it. So they're casting out lines. Whomever sort of bites is going to be the new supply. And the people who are biting, while they might be codependents, people pleasers, or approval seekers, from what I understand, they just don't have the boundaries in place, and they don't really know that there are bad people out there that are doing this. And so I really stay away from the victim blaming sort of leanings of codependence falling for this kind of shit. I believe the narcissist can catch anyone. You could be high intellect, you could be super famous, super wealthy, you could be, there sort of runs the gamut. And I just believe that they will just cast out lines everywhere. They are going to take attention from any creature. People often ask me, is my narcissist gay? And I believe the narcissist is anisexual. They're not pansexual. This isn't a dig at pansexual. So just so you know, they will take attention from any creature. The narcissist actually quite likes dogs because they're getting attention. They will take attention from anything. Does it have a pulse? Is it going to potentially fall for my bullshit? Can I manipulate this creature? Will it give me what I want, which is attention and supply?
Yeah, that makes really a lot of sense. And I think you hit a point with the naivety about there are evil people in the world, that there are people that will come and say, hi, nice to meet you. I'm lying, from the very first words you ever heard. If you are unaware that these people exist, you are a much better qualified, supply, if you would, because, I remember I just, like, somebody did a video, a podcast, and they sent me the link and I popped it open, and I remember talking about the last narcissist I had, and he had three of us at the same time, and we all had a different supply to him. So it was, I was the babysitter and watched his kids when he went to work, and someone else was a massage therapist and gave him massages, and someone else was a mediator. So we were all used for different reasons. So I think another point here is what they need, they find, right? If they need a mediator, they're going to find one. If they need someone with money because they don't have enough, they're going to find one. If they need someone they can control without a lot of money, that they've got the money and they could, get them to comply because they're dangling the carrot of money, they will find whatever the person is, as you said. And I think it runs the gamut because there's no one, you know, you don't have to be beautiful, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be, you know, a professional. It comes in whatever they're looking for. They're looking for someone to be a good mom and make them look like a normal human, then you fit that bill, right? So it's any gamut, but they do tend to go for the boundary, the people that would have a little bit less strong boundaries, I think.
Yeah, and I think if you grow up in a religious background, you're even more vulnerable because in those environments you are primed for servitude. So these are people that are going to be particularly forgiving, maybe get caught up on cliches. I know narcissists love to, bring you in front of mediums and say, this is, what a coincidence, we were supposed to be together. And they are assessing to see if you are going to be one of those people who subscribes to sort of the less scientific approach, something that is kind of more universal, this idea that cliches and a psychic is going to sort of, tell us that we were meant to be together and stuff like that. So they're watching to see if they can kind of mold your brain and control your mind. They don't really, really love people, not always, but I would say by and large, they want somebody who is groomable, and that might include somebody who is less educated, somebody who goes to college, who's a little more savvy. While that would be a good supply for their arm candy and their bragging rights, they understand that there could be some pushback. So they are looking for somebody who's groomable as well. So you have to be able to fall in line.
Absolutely. And I'm going to add one more here. People with fears. If you're afraid of taking care of yourself, someone comes and fits that thing. If you're afraid of whatever it is, they really understand. If you're desperate for love, they'll be the answer, right? So it's those sort of vulnerabilities that make you, again, more on the spectrum of a good supply for someone.
Yeah, and they can sniff that out. Like if you had a recent breakup or if you moved recently, those vulnerabilities, like a shark smelling blood in the water, boy, because they can tell, you might need an ear or you might need this, and they'll kind of swoop in. And before you realize that, it's too late and you've been kind of either love bombed or manipulated. And then oftentimes it's only in the rearview mirror that you can see it clearly.
Sadly, that's what happens with most of us, right? We're like, what happened? And then you learn,
How was that?
yeah, it's like you just don't understand it. So how does this evolve people's children? And how do we make them not fall for being in a cult or with a narcissist?
That's such a great question. So one of the things that I provide psychoeducation to my clients around is very specific to co-parenting, or with the narcissist, it's kind of counter-parenting. And you have to instill in your children this idea of being like a radical independent thinker. You have to identify what lies are, what is fact, what is fiction, because the narcissistic parent is going to gaslight the children and lie to the children and try to confuse, manipulate, and groom the children. So in order for them to become more insulated from that and to have more harm reduction, you have to identify lies, right? So it doesn't have to be as subjective as, okay, daddy's lying or mommy's lying to you. It really could be in the world at large. So let's say they watching a television show. Well, that seems like, Barney was lying there, or that wasn't the truth. The truth is blah, blah, blah. Anytime they see it with their friends, okay, it sounds like little Susie told you something that wasn't true, because that wasn't true. We didn't get there at 3:30. We got there at 3:00. That's the truth. And you really want to kind of solidify in their minds that there is fact and that there is fiction, and they are to be sturdy in the truth, because the narcissist is going to spin this idea of the truth, this sort of alternative facts bullshit that we hear about. That is not how this works. And really kind of, getting them confident in understanding the difference is really imperative, and at a very early age. And make it less, as I mentioned, subjective. It's not about father is a liar. It's about what is the truth and how do you feel about the truth. And the other thing is, letting them question authority, letting them wear different colored socks, drawing outside of the line. We don't want to raise sheep. We don't want to say, kiss your Uncle Joe, and, have them not have autonomy and agency. So you want to instill in your children at an early age, and all parents should do this, not just that you're co-parenting with a narcissist, but it is particularly important when you are, because they need to be able to create boundaries and have autonomy and agency in order for them to survive. The other thing I'll add is that you don't want to spoon feed a toxic parent to children. You don't want to say things like, well, daddy loves you, because we know that isn't necessarily true. And then what happens is those children find me at the ages of 27 or 30, and they're saying, why didn't anyone tell me the truth? I was led to believe there was a Santa Claus and there's no Santa Claus. And then they have all of this work to do. So it's really important that, we have to walk the line. We can't, kind of say, well, your father's a psychopath. But because of the courts, otherwise it actually would probably be ideal. But I think what really well-intentioned parents are trying to do is not hurt their children. So they're kind of like, I don't want to sort of, rip this Band-Aid off, but I don't think you're doing any favors to your kids if you spoon feed them the toxic parent, because the toxic parent will also use that against you in court later on. Wasn't it true that you said that I was a great father? I have it written here on this Christmas card that you sent me. So they will bring all of that stuff to court. So be very careful about that. And those are some of the things I try to kind of instill in my clients.
So when we're trying to teach our kids to identify the lies or the truth in this case, how do we make them feel safe enough to speak up to the narcissistic parent? Like, that's the hardest part for me is, if they speak up, they're in trouble or they become the scapegoat. I mean, there's a risk involved in that. And a lot of parents are hesitant to put the child in that position where they could get in trouble for speaking up.
Yeah, there's no easy answer here. This is no easy answer. This is a really, really challenging case by case, situation by situation experience. And I think the best you can do is tell your children that you are a safe space for them to go to. But then you have to manage the fact that you are not to run back to toxic parent and expose what the child has told you, except for in the case of something that is particularly egregious, because then you'll betray their trust, and then the toxic parent is only going to abuse them further and take that information and exploit it. So if you say, I can't believe you gave little Jimmy peanuts, he has a peanut allergy, and little Jimmy told me that you did that, then you can guarantee that the toxic parent is sure to give little Jimmy more peanuts. So you just set him up for failure in some ways. So a lot of low communication with the abusive parent and trying to manage harm reduction on the other side as best as you can. And it's not always recommended to bump chests with the narcissistic parent for the children. We try to minimize exposure as much as possible. People come to me and they say, well, my ex doesn't want anything to do with the kids. And I go, well, you won the narcissist lottery. That's the best case scenario.
Yeah. But they don't see it because it's also hurting the children, and they don't see the bad parts, that if they were with the narcissistic parent, there'll be, just so much chaos and so much, you and I both work with adult children of narcissists, and the damage is done. The damage gets done in those years. So again, the lottery of, hey, he doesn't want to see them is a dream come true, because, as sad as it is, you help your children, you guide them through that. But at the same time, they don't know the other side of the coin, right? And it's like, don't be sad, be happy. This is good. And I know it's not easy because you've got to glue the kids back together and deal with their abandonment stuff. But at the same time, it's such a much better thing. I wish everybody had that option.
Yeah, because the alternative is that the narcissist oftentimes grooms their children into being like these mini-me's and kind of like a sycophant, just suck their energy. And their entire identity is never even really allowed to manifest, right? So the child becomes this like extension of the narcissist. And when they come to me later on, they don't even know who they are. So if you go through an intimate relationship with a narcissist, like I did, you go back to whoever you were before. So you kind of like, oh, let me go find that girl again, whomever I was before this relationship. When you are the child of a narcissist, you don't even have that person to go back to. So they need to really be kind of, they should be inspired at young ages to find their own way, be their own person, and have autonomy, as I mentioned. So this idea that the narcissist is going to kind of make them identityless is really horrifying. So that's a harder hole to climb out of for so many people. I think being in a relationship with a narcissist is way easier than being the child of, because of that. At least we can go find who we were before. We have to kind of respect the children of narcissists have a harder hill to climb.
For sure. It's a journey. And I've seen people who can't leave their home and they're 40 years old because they've been under this narc umbrella of a parent, and it's terrifying because they've just been so enmeshed and controlled and everything else. But you know, they're dependent on the narcissist, and then all of a sudden, like, what do you mean? I don't want to be with them. They're mean, and then they've got nothing. So it's like a shell was what is.
Yeah, and it usually happens, like I would say, when the child begins to form some kind of interest in peers, right? So we're looking at maybe around the age when they're going to college, you know, they're kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna leave the nest and stuff like that. The narcissist is like, oh, the hell you are. You know, you are supposed to be my minion, and you know, you're supposed to follow me. So it's usually whenever they're gonna start to like step into their own, the narcissist is kind of like, that's when they really sort of, the mask slips.
Yeah, for sure. So is there justice? How do we help people through this cult slash narcissist thing?
Great question. So I think we see justice in the cult space. We actually do see cult leaders are visited by the law. When the victims or the fellowship or the cult members lock arms and fight up against the narcissist, the sociopath, or the psychopath that is leading the cult, they have success. We saw this with Keith Raniere, who is now in jail from the Nexium cult. There was that guy Larry from the Stolen Youth cult. Both of those are New York cults, interestingly enough, where I'm from. But they do get justice when there are numbers, when people are collectively calling them out in a court of law, which I find very interesting, because in our space, when we see the one-on-one relationship, the judicial system totally fails most of my clients by and large. There's two sides to every story and all of this rhetoric and garbage. And what I'm starting to think about, and I put it in my book, and I'm starting to kind of scream from the mountaintops, is that it may be far more important for us to not have this divisive experience where we don't speak to the former supplies. I think we need to start locking arms with others. We see this on some of the Facebook groups where they're saying, did you date this guy? And people are starting to mouth off around this kind of mutual experience that they're having with abusive people. And I think that is trending towards justice. We're not there yet, but I would like to see the numbers kind of, as I mentioned, lock arms and kind of express themselves and not experience this misery in a vacuum alone, silently, as has gone on for so long.
Yeah, you made a really important thing, and the hair on the back of my neck went, "Whee!" She's talking about, talking to the other ex. I ended up in my last relationship talking to his ex-wife, and everything was a lie. And she was very grateful that I was in the picture because she knew somebody was taking care of her children, right? And so I got so much juice from that. But it was really the two other women he was seeing at the same time, that one of them I ended up going to Italy with. Like, we became such best friends that, the truth was, when did you see him? Oh my God, it's the same time. Oh, it's when I was babysitting him. You were in town at the hotel down the street, but he was faking pictures from Chicago and going, I wish you were here, but he was down the street, but I couldn't go out because I had his kid, right? So it was so important to connect with these other people, and validating for all of us. What are the other benefits?
I had the exact same experience. I just want to say that was what really validated me and that really catapulted my confidence. So it checks a lot of boxes, right? So on a micro scale, you're going to have this validation, you're going to have this connection, you're going to have all of these puzzle pieces put together, you're going to see things clearly. And then, as I mentioned, on a macro scale, potentially we could trend towards more justice if we all collectively decide to not suffer in silence and realize that this person was being lied to. The new supply does not understand what's gone on, and we kind of wait quietly to see if they kind of have that same experience, which they will, because it's a pathological disorder. But I think that conversation needs to be had. I think we hear from potentially the media or the press or movies like that, you're just this bitter ex-wives club. And so we don't want to feel that way about ourselves. We don't want to be in that like group. So we're careful. We don't want to, we don't want to be lobbed into some kind of category. And that's just horseshit that the press sort of feeds you. That is not how this works. It's really important for you to have that collective understanding. I can't even tell you how I know for a fact it's not just me, that the others involved, and there were a few, were similarly experiencing that added value. They will say to me all the time, like, it's because of you, you changed my life. And I mean, as you mentioned, I feel the same way, like just get the chills to think about how could I have survived this without having that connection to these precious creatures and how they've sort of saved me and vice versa.
And we're talking about the X, but I think there's also talking to the next supply, if it's safe, if they're open to it. I obviously do what I do, and I'm on YouTube and wrote a book. And one of the people my husband was dating after me ended up contacting me and telling me that I saved her life. And she's in my book with a story that she had about my ex-family. So again, it's either direction. And I think the risks are, and I've had many clients, maybe you have too, that have gone to the next ex and they're shut down and it's a disaster. And then it ramps up the more abuse. So it's almost like some time has to go by. You can't like, oh, they're on their third date and this is a good time to call. It's not going to work for you, right? So the risks are you could pump up if it is someone you've got kids with, and you reach out to the new supply instead of the ex, that could go very, very badly for you.
Yeah, I remember I reached out to his ex-fiance and she said, I'm not going to talk to you. And I said, well, he bleached all my clothes and he spit on me. And she goes, all right, call me later at 8 o'clock. Because she needed to know that I was done. And then I kind of had her communicate with another ex, and they kind of had a little bit of a mending because there was some bitterness, and sort of I tried to cultivate, listen, this one was lying and this one was lying. So you have to try to understand, like, that there were a lot of untruths. When it's really, really challenging is if the new supply participates in the ruination of that supply. So I have some clients that come to me with a ton of shame around, kind of bullying the former supply in court and sort of being a minion of the abuser. So I see that, and they have a lot of shame around, kind of being like the quintessential cult following minion and flying monkey, and doing a lot of the bidding. So that's where it gets a little icky. But if you can rise above that, if you can manage to depersonalize it to the extent that is possible, you will find the glory in having those connections. It has changed my life.
Yeah, it also for me. And I actually just pulled off, I have a mug which says I am the proud member of the crazy. Pretty proud of that. And I gave them to all the other women that they were sleeping with at the same time. And
I love that. That's amazing. That is phenomenal.
Because it's a club, but it's also like a cult. Like I was watching a TED talk the other day about a Nexium victim who was very high up in that program, and she's like, oh my God, I was so sucked in and I got all my family, and and then she showed us the branding, like they literally cut open her stomach and put this guy's initials in her stomach, right? And so it's the same thing when we come back to the next supply or the X. it's like, oh my God, he threw away all the clothes and bleached them. Oh, he did that to me. I found out that my last narc had also had other people arrested. It's what he did. I wouldn't have known that had I not talked to the other people, right? So you really do start to learn a lot from the past of what they've done. And, we wish we could have had it earlier, but it's almost like a sisterhood in some cases. I'm sure the men do it too, but it's a sisterhood that, oh my God, we were both taken by the same person.
Yeah, and then even how you and I are talking, there's this sort of kinship that gets experienced when you are talking to somebody who understands it. And it becomes a little bit of a club of sorts, a tribe of sorts, because it really does add value. What happens in those environments is you feel crazy. You're made to feel crazy. You feel crazy even trying to describe it to people because it's so insidious and strange. And if you start to talk about the passive aggressive, conversations, anybody who's not skilled in this or doesn't understand will be like, I don't get it. Okay, so the guy's passive aggressive. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
So those kinds of things are really, really tricky, and especially if you leave a cult and you feel really crazy, because in the cult environment you are wickedly outnumbered. So can you imagine how crazy it feels to leave a cult where your whole family and everyone around you, all of your friends, is like, the problem is you, Vanessa. You're gonna leave. Look at these hundreds of people standing here. We're all getting branded. What is your problem? We're all okay with this. Then you're like, I really must be the problem, because look at how outnumbered I am. The sheer numbers, will just give you that devastation. And so, that idea of being the crazy ex, yeah, we're kind of in our own tribe.
Absolutely. Is there anything that we missed?
I don't think so. I mean, you know your stuff, so I think you're right on point.
We've kind of covered it. So I want to thank you so much. Tell us how people can reach out, find you, and is that your book back there?
Yeah, I've got my book is coming out here. So this is the galley. This isn't the real thing. This is I fell to the floor the other day because it arrived. I'm so excited. So Narcissistic Abuse, a therapist's guide to identifying, escaping, and healing from toxic and manipulative people, is available at hachette.com, also amazon.com, also Target, Walmart, things like this. I'm really proud of it. It does aim to fuse the concepts of narcissistic abuse and cult abuse, which I believe it's probably the only non-self-published book that does that, but I don't want to be quoted. And then also you can find me at tellatherapist.net, that's TELL, or at Vanessa Reiser, LCSW on Instagram.
Very nice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I hope you guys found that helpful. Not exactly sure how we went from cult to talking to the next ex, but it sort of worked itself in there. So my name is Tracy Malone. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. I am the founder of narcissistabusesupport.com. It is a global resource reaching millions of people every year, educating you on what narcissistic abuse is, whether it's with a partner, with a mother. We've got the resources for you on our website, and so much is going to help you. So if you are listening on a podcast, hello. And please remember that I am also on YouTube. And if you're listening on YouTube, please know that I have a podcast. I always forget to say that. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that there's a lot more where this came from. And dipping into the podcast, if you haven't listened on that platform yet, it's there. So again, this is Tracy Malone. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for listening to Vanessa. We are going to put her information down below, so go check her out if you're interested.